If you've ever had to Google what counts as persistent absence, or you've been handed a letter from the school that's all about your child's attendance and it has made your stomach drop, this episode is for you. Welcome to the Mindful Toolbox podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Lynn, and today's episode, well, let's just say it's going to be a big one. We're going to be talking about how partial timetables can be used as a recovery scaffold and not a punishment, and how you as a parent can advocate for that balance without burning out. I know it's November, but I had to bring out this cutie little mug. It's like pumpkin. For those of you who can't see, it's like a clear glass pumpkin shape. It's so cute. So let's dive into the new DfE guidance that launched in August 2024, because I had so many parents when this came out messaging me that says, does this mean that my child has to go back to full time even if I'm pulling them out the door? And I get it. The wording can sound really harsh. It literally says, all children of compulsory school age are expected to attend full time. Yeah, that's intimidating, especially if your child can't. But if you read a little further, and don't worry, I'm going to link this in the show notes so you can see it for yourself, it also says that schools must work in partnership with families to identify and remove barriers to attendance. And graduated reintegration plans may be necessary for those children whose attendance difficulties stem from anxiety, SEN needs, or medical conditions. So here's the truth. Persistent absence, as we know, we've looked at this in a couple of other episodes. I'm going to link them here. Persistent absence, it's not a failure. It's a feedback loop. It's the nervous system saying something's not safe yet. So we can look at it as an invitation to ask why. Why does my child's body not feel safe enough to attend? This is where the conversation has to shift towards, from getting them back into school to bridging them back gently. Have you ever tried to force someone to do something they didn't want to do? It ends up rupturing a relationship, and that shouldn't be on the shoulders of parents. Parents should never have to be in a position of choosing to get a fine from a school or acknowledging where their child's at. And now, if you've listened to episode 14, you'll remember how we explored how anxiety hijacks learning, right? How when the brain feels unsafe, it literally decreases the memory's working capacity. That same principle applies to school avoidance. A nervous system in survival mode, it can't reason its way into a decision. It's in survival mode. Therefore, we can't reason the children back into a classroom. We need to meet them where they're at. Now, Lisa Feldman Barrett's 2025 research, which we've already looked at, calls this predictive regulation. Remember, the brain doesn't just react to what's happening. It predicts what's coming based on past experience. So if a child's school memories are linked to distress or shame, the brain is going to preload anxiety before they even walk through the school gate. When schools demand a full-time return without rebuilding safety first, that's going to trigger the prediction. And of course, the body budget crashes. But when reintegration is, as we've discussed in previous episodes, phased, predictable, and relational, the brain starts to update that forecast. It rewires the feedback loop. This feels different. Maybe it's not so scary. I can do this. That's why partial timetables shouldn't be seen as avoidance, but neither should they be seen as the only step towards reintegration. It's a temporary safety scaffold that needs to be built around or with many different supports around it. Okay, I want to clear the air. The August 2024 DfE guidance explicitly allows for part-time tables as a temporary planned measure. So, what does that mean? Here's what matters most. They must be part of a written plan. It's not informal and it's not indefinite. The amount of students that we've worked with that have had an indefinite leave or an indefinite partial timetable, it's just creating a bigger hurdle to get back in. The plan that needs to be written should explain why it's needed, how long it'll last, and what supports are in place. This plan needs to be reviewed regularly, and ideally every 2 to 4 weeks. We shouldn't have students partially timetabled for terms at a time, years at a time. And to be honest, I would share that information with the local authority so they can be informed, not to penalize or oversee everything with a monocle glass looking to make sure we're doing everything right, but to ensure safeguarding. That's what they're there for. In other words, when we go and we ask for partial timetabling, we're not asking for special treatment, right? We're asking for something that's lawful, evidence-based adjustments that are grounded in their own inclusion framework, but you're asking for it to be specific. We're asking for it to be a guide, a pathway back to feeling safe around environment, not to be the end result. In 2025, there was a pilot program in Reading and West Berkshire that reported that phased relational returns reduced long-term absence by, drum roll, nearly 30%. The DfE calls this graduated attendance recovery, and it's evidence that these small steps work. So, if you've been told that a partial timetable isn't allowed, I want you to pause this moment and take a deep breath. Because by the end of this episode, you'll have the exact language, policy, and the neuroscience to bring it into your next school meeting. And if that's not more, I've created a 4-week back to school emotional-based school non-attendance guide that you can get either in the link below or by commenting EBSNA 4 weeks in the comments. I'm really excited for you to get your hands on it, especially if you feel like your shoulders have been up to your ears when you've been told that it's not acceptable, because it is. So, before we talk timetables, let's make sure we talk regulation. That's what this entire conversation is about. That's what I want to make sure we're doing. We're acknowledging that we're not just moving pieces around a board. We are seeing the little nervous systems in front of us that are clearly dysregulated. So let's start with a first tool. We're going to open up that toolbox and add even more tools to that EBSNA support toolbox. This might be the most misunderstood when we talk about attendance and anxiety. The idea of regulation first. If you've been here for a little while, you know that this is what we dive into. We talk about how we can emotionally regulate, how we can understand anxiety and how it scientifically impacts the brain. And now we're looking at it through the lens of how it can support or hinder actively engaging with education. Now, if you've got a teen or a young adult, this phrase might make you roll your eyes a little until I share how we can adapt it for the real world. If you've got a 15-year-old who's already feeling self-conscious to stop in the corridor and doing breathing exercises, I get it because it's not real life. I give you those initial guides as starting points. But here's the thing. regulation doesn't have to look like regulation. It just needs to give the brain a window. Remember? 90 to 120 seconds. That helps the brain switch gears before we expect it to learn, socialize, or even cope with day to day. 90 to 120 seconds. Now, this actually doesn't come from me or my brain. I wish it did, but actually it comes from Dr. Bruce Perry's 2025 update from the Child Trauma Academy. They showed that when stress systems have been triggered, even a little bit, the brain's thinking areas, remember the prefrontal cortex, the top part of your hand when you close that fist, it can't come back online instantly because the dog's barking, the amygdala. We've talked about how it needs rhythm or movement or predictability in order to resync both hemispheres of the brain. In our last episode, when we were looking at this through the lens of memory in school, we talked about Perry's ladder, right? To regulate, relate, and then to reason. This year's data shows that the timing, it really matters. And we need about 90 seconds in order to regulate and another 90 to reconnect before we can officially start reasoning. So that's our goal. Not for calm, we're not looking for calm's sake, okay? We're looking for calm so we can connect and move towards that goal that we have. But we can't get there until we calm things down. It's like trying to reason with a toddler. That's what happens when our brain's thinking power, it loses capacity. Now, to give this a little bit more context, I was working with a sixth form student probably early last year. We'll call him Josh. He missed a big chunk of year 11 after he experienced panic attacks at school. And these made it impossible for him to stay in class. When he finally started coming back part-time, the mornings were the hardest. His teachers kept saying he needs to be ready to learn by 9 a.m., which makes sense because that's when the bell rings, that's when everybody else needs to get in. We understand that. But with a little bit of investigation, here's what we discovered. It wasn't the lesson that was stressing him out, like getting him going, because it was every day. It was the actual transition period. It was the noise, the corridors, the unpredictable start of the day. All of the teachers had a different routine. Some of the routines were not really structured. So instead of trying to get him in at 9 sharp, what we did was we built a switch on window. So it was 3 minutes where every day he'd get to school, because he could do that, but he would go to the library every single day first. He'd sit there quietly with headphones in. He'd listen to the playlist that he liked. He'd sit in the same seat. It was at the same time. That rhythm regulated his body budget before all of the social demands began. And within 2 weeks, he was walking himself into first period without any panic, without any worry, without any struggle, and yes, on time for 9 a.m. And I think that's what I'm trying to say. This is what I mean. When I say let's regulate first, for a younger child, it might look like a sensory walk or a breathing exercise or a movement break. For a teen, it's often stealth regulation that we're going for. Walking in between the classes and doing it intentionally alone, so with headphones in. Music before they can go into the class. Fiddling with a bracelet or rings, or sipping water. It looks like normal life, but it's actually a nervous system intervention. So if you've got a teen who'd never agree to a breathing exercise before they walk into a classroom, which I understand, let's pair it with a neutral action, like passing a water bottle back and forth while they do the breathing, or drumming their fingertips in sync like we've talked about, a familiar tune. Perry's 2025 update calls this disguised regulation. It's the same rhythm with a little bit less resistance. Let's bring this back to you. If you're in a school meeting, instead of saying he needs to calm down before class or he can't get into class for 9 a.m., let's try to ground it into the things that we've talked about in the earlier episodes when I gave you scripts for working with schools. Try saying something like, could we build in a brief transition window before the cognitive demand starts? It supports executive functioning and recall. You're saying the same thing, but you're doing it in a way that the school understands the language. And you're doing it in a way that sets you up for being an advocate, an ally on the same page, rather than someone saying, look, they can't do it and I'm not forcing it. You become a team, you and the school. And that's incredibly important. So that's tool 1. Regulate first, even if it's stealth, that's okay. Ultimately, when the body feels safe, the brain can relate and then it can reason. Next, we're going to talk about tool 2, how predictability reduces panic. Another part about predictability? Yes, another part about predictability. Visual predictability, in fact, because it can lower stress for both you and your child. When I was a teacher and I had to think about different accommodations that students would need, we had to think about it in a lesson block, or we had to think of it as a per hour or per task. And so as a school, as a teacher, we often think about things as a time block. But when we're thinking about the nervous system, it's not on a time. It doesn't heal through a 9 a.m. deadline. It heals through predictable safety. So once we've given the brain that regulation window, that chance to breathe before the day even begins, which, let's be honest, could serve all of us, the next step to create that safety is predictability. Because anxious brains don't just fear what's happening, they fear what might happen. So I'm going to bring us back to last episode when I introduced Lisa Feldman Barrett's predictive brain theory. Remember, their brain has a predictive story that tells them that when they go into the exam, it's going to be unsafe, uncomfortable, and anxiety-inducing. I got so excited about this, and actually you did too. The feedback on Instagram and YouTube was quite good to see that we all saw that it is incredible that our brain doesn't just react to the things around it, it predicts it. Every sound, smell, social cue, it gets compared against our past experiences. So if the brain doesn't have a clear forecast, it will do a survival technique and assume danger. That is why transitioning, like new teachers, new classrooms, even small changes in routine, can feel like, I don't know, walking into a foggy forest. You may have walked that forest before, but when it's foggy, you have no idea where you're going. And that feels intimidating. When this happens, the body's energy budget, as we know, it diverts away from memory and focus and straight into survival. Last time in particular, we looked at how anxiety drains the brain's body budget during learning. But today we're using that same framework, Lisa Feldman Barrett's work of the body budget, to understand attendance. Because walking through the gate is a metabolic task as well. It takes energy. So the goal isn't to just add on comfort and bubble wrap them in safety. No, we're all about resilience here. Instead, it's about reducing uncertainty. So giving them tools to handle a very uncertain world beyond school gates. But here's the challenge. When your child's already in that heightened state, you can't plan the whole day aloud to them, right? It's just going to trigger more panic. So here's how we go about it. We need to predict, but we need to do it with a light touch. We can even call it a micro preview plan, like the student that I was working with. We're going to call her Maya. So Maya had been out of school for 6 weeks after daily panic attacks at the gate. And this seems like it's something that's more consistent or more apparently happening. So if this is you, hopefully Maya's story can add a little bit of comfort knowing that there's hope. Because while her mornings started with overwhelm and anxiety and that big panic attack, they all of a sudden went to nothing. No shouting, no movement, just frozen. So we stopped focusing on the day and we started previewing just the first 15 minutes. So the night before, Mom would sit with Maya and she would say, okay, Maya, tomorrow we'll leave at 8:20. So you're going to have your earbuds in the car. I've already put them in there for you. I'm going to walk you to the gate. And I'm going to sit and wait at the bench for 5 minutes, even if you go in. That was it. No promises about lessons, no forced positivity, just a gentle, predictable outline. This is what's going to happen. And over the week, we added tiny previews. Who'd meet her at the gate, right? Relational reintegration. We need that safety buddy. Who's going to meet her at the gate? Which classroom is she going to start in? Let's start looking at a timetable now. What subject is she doing first? What books is she going to need? This shift was so subtle, but it was actually really powerful. Her brain stopped forecasting danger and started forecasting what is known in small, bite-sized pieces. Slowly, her energy started coming back, and school drop-off was way less stressful for everyone involved. And this is exactly what Barrett's predictive model and Bruce Perry's regulation ladder agree upon. When the brain feels safe, when it knows what's coming, it stops bracing and starts being able to engage. It's not avoidance that's happening here, it's energy conservation. And I understand that we can't wrap our children up in these ladders forever. But if we give them the tools to meet them where they're at and say, look, these are ways that we can slowly expose ourselves to things that feel hard, we're giving them resilience training. We're providing them with the skills they'll need to go out beyond the school. So these are not permissive for them to get things easier. What they're doing is predictability. We're reducing the unknowns before the reasoning so that the reasoning can kick back in. So again, circling it back to you, the parent, how can we bring this into a school meeting? Perhaps we can say something like, could we create a visual outline of my child's day? Even if it's short right now, can we create that visual outline so that way they can preview what to expect each morning? Sorry, I got really distracted. I think I've got chocolate on my sweater. Okay. This brings us to tool number 3, which are parallel pathways at home. This is where you as a parent come in. You know, the DfE says non-attendance hours should include meaningful educational activity. This doesn't mean that we need to mirror what they're doing at school at home, but it does mean that we need to bridge the confidence that we need them to be building at home to the confidence that they're going to bring back to that learning environment when they go back. Small projects of interest like art, cooking, mechanics, coding, they need to be doing something that gives quiet, structured learning slots at similar times each day, so we are giving them a mirrored vision of what they're going to expect at school, just as what they're experiencing when they're on that partial timetable. And just like you would ask your child how they feel at the end of the day or what they've learned after school, try a 2-minute reflection at the end. What felt hard? What went well? It's our staple question, and we absolutely love asking our children this because it gives them a predictable space to talk to you. When your child experiences mastery in safe spaces, that confidence transfers back to the classroom. And that's what we want. It's resilience building. So if you take just one thing from today's episode, please let it be this. You are not being difficult when you ask for safety first. And you should advocate for it because it can definitely help, but we need to make sure we have the other systems in place because a partial timetable by itself will not be the answer. So when you sit in that next meeting with the school, please remember you are not asking for less. You don't want less on your child's timetable. What you're asking is for what works to bridge the gap, to help them emotionally regulate, to build resilience so they can one day reintegrate with learning in a real meaningful way. And before I let you go, don't forget, if you comment down below EBSNA week guide, 4-week guide, I can send you our downloadable where I've created the scripts, the structure, and all of the tools that I've shared in this particular playlist that specifically talks about EBSNA support. Everything I shared in those episodes are in this jam-packed guide. So don't forget to click the link below or comment EBSNA 4-week guide and I'll make sure to get that back to you. So if this episode gave you the language, gave you the confidence, gave you a small tweak that you can make, or even a little bit of a safe space to just exhale and breathe, please share it with another parent or teacher. The more we normalize flexible relational returns, the faster the system can evolve and the more empowered our children are going to feel. And don't forget to set a reminder 2 Thursdays from today, the next Mindful Toolbox episode, we're going to be shifting gears a little bit and we're going to be talking about how to build low stress study slots over the holidays. Say that 3 times fast. Low stress study slots, low stress study slots. How we're going to build stress-free studying over the holidays that can help kids stay confident without burning out. Because like we've always talked about, structure can feel like safety, but only if it's done with calm, not pressure. All right, take care. We'll see you in the next one.